Hello everyone, my name is Constance and this is We Are Open and Diverse. Today's episode is called Covid-19 Crisis, a Gender Equality Nightmare. Let's start by clarifying that the past months have been tough on everyone, and all of us are trying to keep things running. That being said, the lockdown does affect people unequally. In this episode, we are going to focus on people with caring responsibilities. With schools, daycares, and home care falling away, those with caring tasks suddenly have to do 2 jobs, but the day still only has 24 hours. This influences our productivity. This influences our mental and physical health, and it influences the health of the people we care for. Care work also affects people unequally. We know that women perform the majority of all care and household work, even in partnerships where the woman is the sole breadwinner. And if you think that is tough, think about single parents. They have to perform all tasks, all the time. So, is the lockdown a nightmare for gender equality and for the efforts of creating a more gender-inclusive labor market? If female productivity declines, so might career opportunities. We hear that there have been fewer journal submissions by female authors, whereas male ones stay stable or even increase. And colleagues report that research has been basically unthinkable in the past months. If caretaking parents cannot be productive, they might not have a shot at that promotion. They might not fulfill the tenure criteria they discussed with their manager. They might not get that permanent contract. And they might not stay in academia. So the question is what to do. How can we make sure that corona crisis management does not turn a blind eye on these crucial inequalities? Here to discuss this today are 2 dear UM colleagues, Dr. Ceren Pekdemir, Assistant Professor at Maastricht Sustainability Institute, mother of 2, and member of the local consultative body of Maastricht University, and Dr. Darian Meacham, father of 2 and philosopher with an interest in questions surrounding the nature of work. Welcome, both of you. We are touching here on 2 broader issues, the meaning of work and the role of women in Dutch academia. Darian, as a philosopher, so what is the nature of care work?
So when we talk about care, we can think about both what types of things we are caring for, who is doing the caring and caring for what, but also what kinds of efforts and what kinds of activities that caring activity or those caring activities entail. I think we also need to bear in mind that care is a broad and multifaceted term, so we can think about who it is that we're caring for or what it is that we're caring for, and we can also think about the different forms that that care takes. And we know that different kinds of care involve different kinds of effort. And so when I have to take care of my 5-year-old, to get her up in the morning and get dressed and get food on the table, and well, it used to be get her out the door for school, and now it's get her to sit down and try to focus on an activity for at least part of the morning. That's generally both a physically, intellectually, and an emotionally demanding task. On the other hand, when I speak to my mother who's in quarantine half a world away, it's a different kind of effort that's involved. So it's largely an emotional effort that is involved, and I have to really make an effort to empathize and to try to understand and to listen to her concerns and her fears. Both of those are forms of care, quite obviously, I think, but there are very different types of effort involved. And so it's important not to lose sight of the idea, of course, that care can involve great effort and great strain, but the, let's say, qualitative aspects of that effort and that strain are not always the same. So if I spend 5 minutes in the morning thinking about the true nature of the beautiful, because that's what philosophers like to do in the morning, I actually am probably going to come away from that feeling rather refreshed. Yes, some intellectual effort was expended, but that intellectual effort makes me feel quite good, actually. On the other hand, if my partner has to make 52 little decisions about what the children are going to wear, what she's going to wear, when her next meeting is, when her husband's next meeting is, what's going to be for lunch, what's going to be for dinner, who are we going to talk to on Skype, and so on and so forth, Well, of course, that also involves an enormous amount of intellectual effort, but the strain of that effort, I think, is going to leave, let's say, a lasting impact that's slightly different from the strain of me thinking about the true nature of the beautiful. Care is an absolutely essential part of our existence as human beings.
Ceren, as a member of the labor union, do you recognize these difficulties for caretakers, but especially for women in the context of Dutch academia?
Certainly, we do know that. So a lot of women are also caregivers and care in the household for family members. Just as Darian explained nicely, the different varieties in care that goes on. But what we definitely know is that there's no gender equality within academia, and it's not an equal level playing field for women, not globally, but certainly also not in the Netherlands. So, and we're now receiving many signals that things are off, that the current crisis is having an impact. But if we just even not look at the current crisis, but just look at the gender inequality that we do have, then what we see is that, for instance, women for the same type of functions get paid less within academia. And this idea that women don't negotiate or they don't ask for a raise, that's a myth. It has been proven that they do ask for it, they just don't get the same results back. What we also see is that there are less women the higher you go up in the academic rank. Women get to spend less time on research and more on teaching obligations. They're often more in temporary contracts. And actually the list goes on and on. So this definitely shows that it's not a level playing field for women.
And that makes me think that actually it's a very pragmatic choice of many partnerships to say, well, the woman takes more caring responsibilities because she does not have the permanent contract or she works part-time and she anyways earns less. So it's not necessarily an ideological choice, but a pragmatic choice to now divide the caring tasks unequally. But the question is then, what are the consequences of these pragmatic choices?
This is a choice that occurs within an already, let's say, bad situation. And so a good choice within a bad situation is not always a good choice overall. And it's also a choice that risks further exacerbating some of the negative characteristics of the existing situation.
Ceren, what do you think are the short and long-term consequences then of making these pragmatic decisions at the moment in this crisis?
Well, what we certainly see is that there's a drop in productivity, at least in work-related output. And it's foreseeable that many people, and by the way, not only women, but also other caregivers, which can be men, of course, as well, but also our colleagues who have to step up and take over some of the work that our caregivers have at the moment. But they can also miss out on important projects. They're either not assigned to them or they miss important deadlines. And we definitely know this in the context, for instance, of grant proposals. So that's a very serious deal, not only for the short term, but definitely also so for the long term. And it will only exacerbate the issues, the inequality issues that we have until the future, the long-term future.
What can we do? What kind of measures can we take to prevent this situation from really becoming a gender equality nightmare?
Well, I definitely think that we should not shy away from the topic that measures need to be taken to help out those who have been investing their time in other things than their own careers just because of sheer necessity. I think our leaders and I think people in key positions who have the ability or negotiation power to decide upon the career perspective of other colleagues, they should really make careful considerations. For instance, when deciding upon tenure, how will the accomplishments of the candidates be evaluated during the current pandemic and the coming period ahead? Measures can be that extensions are granted, for instance, to meet certain criteria. But I also think that if the ability of a particular person is already quite obvious, then issues such as number of publications, I think, could imaginably be lowered. so as not to continue or even deepen the inequalities that exist in wages. Because if you talk about prolonging the period for someone meeting criteria, you also talk about the time factor and the time that needs to be put in, and not making that chance to climb up that ladder as quickly or easily. And I think we can think of it in similar terms in yearly assessments as well. Some of our colleagues have been taking care of others, others had to take over responsibilities of other people. And let's have a fair look at that and discuss this together.
I would just reiterate that I think it's really important that we take steps to ensure that the current crisis doesn't lead to the exacerbation of existing gender imbalances and gender equalities.
So we've now been talking about caretakers, and especially women, quite a lot. What about the men in all this? Darian?
I recently saw a great headline in the New York Times that read, 45% of men who were surveyed think that they're taking on an equal role in the homeschooling of their children. 3% of women agreed with that. We can think about some opportunities that do emerge from this current situation, and one of those opportunities is for men to try to listen and communicate better with their partners, with their families, with those around them who are taking on caring roles, and try to understand what those roles entail, try to understand also the efforts and strains that are involved in those roles. It's not just about enumerating a list of tasks, but it's understanding what those tasks entail and the kind of efforts and the kind of strains that those tasks often put on the people that have to carry them out. I think it's also the case that men can be constrained by existing gender stereotypes and gender roles. And it can be the case that men might have the feeling that the existing incentive structures in their professional lives don't provide space for them to take on caring roles that they might wish to.
So, Ceren, we have men that would like to take on more tasks. We say that partners should listen more and pay more attention, but we also do know that this is a more complex issue where incentives might not be equally distributed also in an organization. So what do you think, what can we do to enable partners to take on more caring responsibilities, to level the playing field?
Well, I definitely think we need to further the cultural shift, but if I think about what we can do as an organization, I think there's also a big role in that to play for the human resource department. And let me tell you a little bit more about the current Dutch situation at the moment. So in the Netherlands, starting from July this year, if you are a partner to a woman who gave birth, you can take up to 70% paid partner leave, which can actually go up to 6 weeks. It will start in July, and we've never seen anything like this before in the past. So we do see this cultural shift happening, and I think if I talk from my own experience, I think in Dutch society more and more men are embracing the idea of being there in the family and being present for the children, not as a breadwinner, but also being there. So this is at least what I see in my immediate surrounding and also in the people of my generation. And I think that for departments such as the Human Resource Department that we have, they can actively draw attention to that new right of men and promote it. And I think if it would have been, for instance, 100% paid leave, and people and families wouldn't have to incur any financial loss for wanting to do that caregiving task, I think we would see even more tremendous steps that could be taken in this regard.
So what kind of conclusions can we draw from the discussion we just had, but also from the larger observations that we've been making over the past weeks?
Well, I think there are clear signs that this could very well become a gender equality nightmare. And what we've seen in the past years is that slowly progress is being made in terms of gender equality in academia, at least when we look at the incremental change for women being appointed as full professorship in the Netherlands. But all those points I raised at the start of our conversation about women having lower wages, less time for research and such. And I think those things can certainly deepen if we and our colleagues in important positions do not raise this issue and call for appropriate measures for those who have incurred during this pandemic. And I think that we have to continue our investment in gender equality.
Darian, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I think that this situation potentially becomes a nightmare if we allow for the existing disparities or existing inequalities that Ceren has so eloquently discussed to become exacerbated. On the other hand, we have an opportunity now, as some of these issues are coming to the fore and as we're discussing them more openly, to try to think about how to address them not only within the context of the current crisis, because these problems didn't just emerge 2 months ago or 1 month ago, but how to address them in the longer term. And I think it's really a positive thing that we're starting to have those conversations. I think it's a positive thing that the distribution of care work is starting to become a topic that's discussed not just amongst academics, but also on the headlines of international newspapers. So I think those are positive signs, and I think we have to work to try to ensure that those positive steps, small steps, are carried forward.
Thank you very much. I think let's keep talking about this, let's keep listening to each other, and let's keep taking on these conversations in decision making in the next weeks and months and years to come. Thank you both for joining today. Hang in there and take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.